The neon hum of the Ella's Diner sign buzzed softly, a flickering glow that cast ghostly reflections on the rain-drenched pavement. Inside, the familiar rhythm of the diner pulsed, a gentle symphony of clinking plates, forks scraping against ceramic, and the occasional sharp ping of the kitchen bell. Marcus, hands worn from routine, wiped the counter. His eyes flicked to the clock, 10:17 p.m. The night stretched before him, another long shift that was all too familiar. At 26, he'd mastered the late hours, balancing the grind of his diner job, his side hustle of custom sneakers, and the ever-churning hopes of dreams that always seemed to be just out of reach. But tonight, the usual hum felt different, heavy. The regulars lingered in their usual booths, nursing coffee refills, their tired faces caught between exhaustion and an endless loop of time. "Table 4 is ready for pickup," May the head cook called, her voice cutting through the noise. Marcus gave a quick nod, grabbed the plate of steaming waffles and eggs, and carefully navigated the narrow aisle between tables. It was then that the door chimed open, bringing with it a figure who stood out in the dim-lit room. The man who entered was older, mid-50s perhaps, with salt and pepper hair, his face etched with the weight of time and fatigue. His eyes carried a quiet intensity, and his hands rested firmly on the wheels of a wheelchair. He moved with a steady precision, as though the world around him had slowed down just enough to make every action deliberate. The air seemed to still as he rolled in, heads turning momentarily before resuming their meals. The usual buzz of chatter faded into the background as Marcus, with his practiced smile, approached the man's table. "Good evening, sir. Would you like a table or a booth?" Marcus asked, his voice smooth yet laced with curiosity. "A table, please," came the man's reply, calm and steady but lined with weariness. Marcus guided him to a spot near the window, where the streetlights painted the rain-soaked world outside in a pale, somber glow. He placed the laminated menu before the man. "Take your time. Let me know when you're ready," Marcus offered, before stepping away, though his attention never strayed far. Something about the man's stillness, the way his hands rested on the table, as if weighing their own worth, tugged at Marcus's thoughts. The sounds of the diner swirled around him, plates clattering, voices mingling, but Marcus's gaze kept returning to the man. His presence, quiet yet undeniably intense, commanded something more than just passing attention. The usual bustle was suddenly muted in comparison. "Table 4's up." May's voice cracked through his reverie. Marcus shook himself out of the moment, focused again, and refocused on the task. He turned back toward the man by the window when it was time to take his order. The tension in the man's brow had eased slightly, but his exhaustion lingered. "I'll have the grilled chicken sandwich," the man said, folding the menu neatly, his voice now steady. "Coffee? Black." "Coming right up," Marcus replied, scribbling the order quickly before heading toward the kitchen. As the man settled into his seat, he seemed to fade into the diner's rhythm once more, just another patron in a long line of faces. Yet for Marcus, there was something different about him, something intangible that made the man feel less like a stranger, and more like a chapter waiting to be read. He couldn't shake the feeling, even as he moved between tables, checking in with the other customers, serving drinks and clearing plates. When Marcus finally returned with the man's meal, he placed it gently on the table. "Here you go. If you need anything else, just wave me over," he said, his voice warm with genuine friendliness. The man offered a small, appreciative smile before focusing on his food. Marcus started to turn away, but then he saw it. The man's hands trembled, the fork struggling to stay in his grip, a struggle invisible to the other patrons, but impossible for Marcus to ignore. He hesitated, torn. He didn't want to embarrass the man, but there was something in him, some quiet pull that demanded action. With a soft exhale, Marcus approached again. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said gently, keeping his voice low and without intrusion. "Would you like a little help with that?" The man froze, the fork hanging in the air. His eyes locked with Marcus's, searching for any trace of pity, any hint of judgment. Instead, Marcus only met him with sincerity. I don't want to trouble you," the man murmured, his voice unsure. "It's no trouble at all," Marcus assured him, stepping into the space without hesitation. He sat across from the man and, without a word, reached for the sandwich. He cut it into smaller, more manageable pieces before placing it back on the plate. "There you go. Let me know if I can do anything else." The man's expression softened, the lines around his eyes loosening for the first time that night. "Thank you," he said quietly. "It's not every day someone goes out of their way like this." Marcus shrugged, trying to make light of it. "It's just part of the job, you know? Making sure people leave happy." The man's smile was faint but genuine, and he took a bite of the sandwich, his hands steadying as he chewed. The two of them sat there, sharing a brief moment of quiet companionship. Marcus stole occasional glances toward the kitchen, wondering if May was eyeing him with judgment for sitting down. But the moment was too precious to interrupt. After a while, Marcus broke the silence. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, his curiosity bubbling up. He hadn't seen the man before, and the diner's patrons were almost all regulars. The man shook his head. "No, just passing through. I was in town for some meetings, and decided to stay an extra day to clear my head." "Meetings, huh? Business?" Marcus asked, leaning back slightly, cautious not to press too far. "Something like that," the man replied cryptically, taking a sip of his coffee. "Name's Ben, by the way." "Nice to meet you, Ben." "I'm Marcus," he replied. "Marcus," the man repeated, as if testing the name. "You've got good instincts. Most people would have just walked away." Marcus chuckled nervously. "Well, I don't like to see people struggle when I can help. Guess it's just how I was raised." Ben's gaze lingered on him, thoughtful. Then, as if making a decision, he nodded and returned to his meal. "I'll let you enjoy your food," Marcus said, sensing that the moment had run its course. "Just holler if you need anything." As Marcus returned to his duties, he couldn't shake the feeling that Ben was more than just another passerby. There was something significant about him, though Marcus couldn't explain why. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Ben watching him, observing, not staring. A quiet, silent observation, as if the man was taking note of something unspoken. The diner grew quieter as the night wore on, but Marcus's mind stayed restless, unable to stop glancing toward Ben's table. The man's demeanor wasn't just that of a tired traveler. There was a depth to him that Marcus couldn't ignore. When he noticed Ben struggling again, this time with the coffee mug, attempting to lift it, but finding it difficult, Marcus acted without hesitation. He knelt beside the table, meeting Ben's gaze. "Would you like me to refill that for you? Or maybe bring a straw?" Ben hesitated, looking at Marcus for a long moment before nodding. "A straw would be great. Thank you." Marcus retrieved the straw and slid it into the mug. Ben's lips curved into a small, approving smile. "You're very observant, Marcus. That's not something you can teach." "I guess I just try to pay attention," Marcus replied with a shrug. "You'd be surprised how much people say without saying anything." Ben chuckled softly, sipping his coffee through the straw. Wise words for someone so young. "I get that a lot," Marcus said, grinning. "But honestly, I've just been through enough to know when someone could use a little help." Ben's eyes flickered with recognition, as if Marcus's words had unlocked something deeper. He set his coffee down and leaned back, his hands resting on the table. "I've been on the receiving end of kindness a few times," Ben said quietly. "But it's been a while since it felt this genuine." Marcus, unbothered by the curious glances from the other diners, sat down across from him. "If you don't mind me asking, what brought you to Ellis tonight? I mean, of all the places you could have gone." Ben shifted his gaze to the window, where the rain still fell, soft and steady beneath the amber streetlights. "I wasn't planning on coming here, honestly. Just driving through, saw the sign, thought I'd stop for some coffee. Maybe it's time to clear my head." Marcus heard the words, but there was something more beneath them. Ben's voice was calm, inviting, but also held an unspoken weight. Marcus waited, sensing there was more, but he let Ben take his time. Ben smirked just a little. "You could say that," he said, leaning back, his gaze distant. "Let's just say I've been making some decisions lately. Big ones." He paused, and Marcus could almost feel the heaviness of those words. "The weight of it all is more than I expected." Marcus nodded. He wasn't one to push for answers, not anymore. He had learned over the years that people would share when they were ready. Instead, he shifted the conversation. "So, what do you do, Ben? For work, I mean?" Ben seemed to ponder the question, his fingers briefly tracing the edge of his cup. "I've done a few things over the years," he started, his voice thoughtful. "These days, I mostly help people connect the dots in their lives. Show them how to reach their full potential." "Sounds important," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. "You must meet a lot of interesting people." Ben's eyes met his, a hint of something wistful flickering in their depths. "I do," he replied. "But meeting people like you reminds me that it's not always about the big movers and shakers. Sometimes the smallest acts leave the biggest impressions." The words settled in Marcus's chest like stones, heavy and humbling. He didn't know how to respond, but it was as if Ben's simple statement grounded him, like it put him in touch with something deeper. Before he could gather his thoughts, May's voice sliced through the quiet. "Marcus," the back stacking up. "Need you for dishes." "Duty calls," Marcus said with a half smile. "You good for now, Ben?" Ben smiled warmly, his earlier weight lifting just slightly. I'm good. Thanks. As Marcus made his way toward the kitchen, he glanced over his shoulder. Ben was still there, looking out the window. His face was unreadable, his thoughts far away, as though he were a man lost in time. Hours later, when Marcus returned to the floor, the diner was quieter than before. He was drying his hands on a towel, the familiar scent of soap mixing with the lingering aroma of coffee. Ben was still sitting at the same spot by the window, his plate cleared, the coffee cup pushed to the side. Outside, the rain had slowed to a soft mist. The streetlights outside bathed the diner in a warm glow, making it feel like a small sanctuary in the middle of a forgotten world. Marcus grabbed the coffee pot, walking over to Ben's table. Still good for a top-up? He asked with a grin. Or are you all coffeeed out? Ben looked up, his smile faint but genuine. One more won't hurt. Marcus poured the coffee, the rich aroma filling the space between them. As he moved to walk back to the counter, Ben spoke again, his voice softer now, as if he were speaking to himself. You ever feel like the universe throws people in your path for a reason? Marcus paused, a flicker of curiosity rising within him. I guess I've thought about it. Why do you ask? Ben leaned forward slightly, his eyes searching Marcus's. I didn't expect to end up here tonight, he said. Didn't expect to meet someone like you. Marcus raised an eyebrow and pulled over a chair, sitting across from him. Now you've got me curious, Ben. What's your story? Ben chuckled softly, shaking his head. It's a long one. You sure you've got time? Marcus gestured to the nearly empty diner, a place now as quiet as a library in the dead of night. Plenty. Ben exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping to his hands for a moment. I wasn't always in this chair, you know, he said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of 1,000 untold stories. 10 years ago, I was a different man. Married, working as an art dealer in Los Angeles. Traveling the world. Living what I thought was the dream. What happened? Marcus asked, his voice careful, soft. A car accident, Ben said bluntly, though his voice didn't hold bitterness. Driver ran a red light. I survived. But... His voice trailed off, the weight of those words hanging in the air. Well, you can see the rest. Marcus's chest tightened as he nodded, the heaviness of Ben's words sinking in. That's rough. I'm sorry, man. Ben's smile was faint, but it was real, more real than the exhaustion etched into his features. It was hard at first. Losing my mobility felt like losing everything. But what really hit me was realizing how much of myself I'd wrapped up in what I could do, what I could achieve. When that was taken away, I didn't know who I was anymore. That's heavy, Marcus said, his voice quiet. But you seem like you found your way. Ben's smile grew, though it was tempered with a quiet sadness. I did. Eventually. Took years of therapy, both physical and emotional, to get here. His voice grew lighter as he spoke, like the burden was being lifted. But the thing that saved me was art. Marcus leaned in, intrigued. Art. Ben nodded, his eyes lighting up just a little. Not selling it. Making it. I'd always loved painting, but I buried it under the pressure of running my business. After the accident, I had nothing but time. So I picked up a brush again. And it saved you? Marcus asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Ben's expression softened. It gave me purpose again. Eventually, I started showing my work. Small galleries. People responded to it in ways I never expected. It made me realize I didn't have to be the guy I was before to make an impact. That's incredible, Marcus said, his voice full of genuine admiration. You turned something so painful into something meaningful. Ben nodded again, his face growing serious. But here's the thing, Marcus. I didn't do it alone. There were people along the way. Friends. Strangers. Even a random barista who showed me kindness when I needed it most. That's why I'm so big on paying it forward. Marcus felt a pang of humility, like he'd been touched by something much bigger than himself. Sounds like you've been through a lot. But it also sounds like you've made a real difference. Ben smiled, a quiet, determined glint in his eyes. Maybe, but the way I see it, there's always more to do. Always someone else who could use a little kindness. The weight of Ben's words lingered in the air, unspoken yet understood, like a pact between them. As the hum of the coffee machine filled the silence of the near-empty diner, Marcus couldn't help but feel that this conversation, this moment, was leading somewhere bigger than either of them realized. Later, Marcus found himself clearing tables, wiping down counters, his thoughts still tangled in the conversation. Something about Ben's story felt unfinished, like there was more he wasn't saying. As he refilled a napkin dispenser near Ben's table, the older man spoke again, his voice steady, purposeful. Marcus, Ben said, drawing his attention back to the table. Can I ask you something? Marcus turned, intrigued. Of course. Why do you do this? Ben gestured to the diner, to the job Marcus worked at without a second thought. Helping people like me without hesitation. You strike me as someone who could be doing a lot more. Marcus chuckled, leaning against the booth. It's not as noble as you think. I'm just trying to make ends meet. This job keeps the lights on while I figure out the rest. The rest? Ben's tone was curious, searching. Yeah, Marcus admitted. I've got dreams like everyone else. I want to start my own sneaker business someday. Custom designs, you know? Something unique. But dreams don't pay the bills, so here I am. Ben studied him for a long moment, his gaze piercing, unreadable. Finally he leaned forward, his voice calm but with an undeniable weight. What if I told you I could help with that? Marcus blinked, caught off guard. Help? How? Ben smiled faintly and reached into his messenger bag. He pulled out a thick folder, sliding it across the table. Take a look. Marcus hesitated for a moment before opening the folder. Inside were photos of vibrant community centers, detailed plans for art programs, and testimonials from people whose lives had been transformed. At the heart of it all was a foundation dedicated to uplifting underserved communities through art, mentorship, and entrepreneurship. This is what I do now, Ben said. I use my resources to create opportunities for people who deserve a shot. People like you. Marcus stared at the folder, his mind racing. Why me? We just met. Ben's expression softened, almost tender. Because I see something in you, Marcus. The way you noticed me struggling. The way you helped without hesitation. That's rare. And it's exactly what I look for. Marcus shook his head, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. I don't know, Ben. This is a lot. I'm just a guy trying to get by. Ben's voice was firm, cutting through the uncertainty. You're more than that. You've got heart. And that's something you can't teach. He paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. I've been searching for someone to help me expand this foundation, to lead new initiatives. I think you're that person. The gravity of Ben's words hung in the air, leaving Marcus momentarily speechless. His eyes drifted back to the folder on the table. His fingers brushed over the photos. Images of smiling faces, workshops buzzing with activity, and thriving communities. His mind raced. Could this really be his chance to make a difference? Not just for himself, but for others? Is this real? Marcus asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. It's real, Ben affirmed with a steady nod. But you don't have to decide right now. Take the night to think it over. If you're interested, meet me here tomorrow at noon, and we'll talk about the details. Marcus closed the folder carefully, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what to say, didn't even know how to process what was unfolding. All he could manage was a quiet, thank you. Ben smiled, his eyes warm with understanding. Thank you, Marcus, for reminding me why I do this. As Marcus watched Ben wheel himself toward the door, a strange mix of emotions surged within him. Gratitude, disbelief, and a flicker of hope he hadn't felt in years. The following morning felt surreal. Marcus had hardly slept, his mind racing with endless possibilities and self-doubt. The folder Ben had left him sat on the small kitchen table in his cramped apartment, its contents spread out like pieces of a puzzle begging to be solved. He read through the documents again, his fingers tracing over images of smiling faces, bustling workshops, and thriving communities. Could this truly be his chance to create change? By noon, Marcus found himself back at Ella's diner, sitting at the same table where Ben had sat the night before. The diner was quieter in the daylight, and Marcus felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His palms were damp, and he couldn't stop fidgeting with the corner of the folder. The jingling of the doorbell snapped him from his thoughts. Ben rolled in, calm and composed, his demeanor as if this meeting was just another step in a plan long in motion. He wheeled over to Marcus's table and offered a warm smile. Good to see you again, Ben said, parking his wheelchair beside the booth. How are you feeling? Marcus let out a nervous chuckle. Honestly, a little overwhelmed. This is a lot to take in. Ben nodded, his expression understanding. I get it. Opportunities like this don't come around every day. But I wouldn't have offered it if I didn't believe you were the right person. Marcus glanced at the folder, then back at Ben. Why me though? I'm just a waiter trying to get by. What makes you think I can do this? Because you already have what it takes, Ben said, his voice steady. Compassion. Leadership. The ability to see people for who they are, to make them feel valued. That's not something you can learn in a classroom. It's something you carry in your soul. The sincerity in Ben's words struck Marcus harder than he expected. For so long, he'd felt invisible, like his dreams were too distant to ever reach. Yet here was someone who saw him, believed in him. What would this look like? Marcus asked, tentative yet curious. If I said yes, what happens next? Ben leaned in, his eyes lighting up with excitement. You'd start as a program leader, working with communities to develop initiatives that align with your passions. We'd fund your sneaker business as part of a mentorship program, showing others how to turn their ideas into reality. You'd also help organize workshops and events, using your own story to inspire others. Marcus's breath caught. You're serious? You'd help me start my own business? Absolutely, Ben confirmed with a smile. Because it's not just about creating something for yourself. It's about showing others what's possible. You've got the drive and vision. I'll give you the resources and guidance to make it happen. For a moment Marcus couldn't speak. His dream, the one he'd always clung to, the one he thought was too far out of reach, suddenly felt within grasp. I don't know what to say, Marcus admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Ben's smile widened. Say yes, he urged gently. Say yes, and let's change some lives together. Marcus looked down at the folder one last time. The weight of the decision pressed on him. Then, with a deep breath, he looked up at Ben and extended his hand. Yes, Marcus said firmly. Let's do this. Ben's smile beamed as he shook Marcus's hand. Welcome to the team. In the weeks that followed, Marcus's life transformed in ways he couldn't have imagined. The diner, once a place where he merely passed time, became just a chapter in his story, not the whole book. With Ben's guidance, Marcus launched his sneaker business and spearheaded community programs that empowered others to chase their own dreams. Together, they showed that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples of change. Months later, Marcus stood in the heart of a bustling community center in Memphis, Tennessee. Laughter and chatter filled the air, and the unmistakable energy of hope radiated from every corner. What had once been an abandoned building on a neglected street was now a vibrant hub of creativity and learning. Bright murals, painted by local children with the help of volunteer artists, adorned the walls. Marcus watched a group of teens customizing sneakers at one of the workshop tables, their focused expressions mirroring his own once uncertain determination. It was surreal. His dream, the one he thought was impossible, was now a reality. And it was bigger than he ever imagined. Ben wheeled up beside him, his face glowing with pride. Looks like you're a natural, he said, nodding toward the workshop. Marcus grinned. It's surreal. I never thought I'd be here doing this. You earned it, Ben replied, his voice full of pride. Marcus's eyes swept across the room. The community center wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of what was possible when people came together. Programs ranged from art therapy to business mentorship, and free meals for families in need were offered. And at the heart of it all was Marcus, whose journey from diner waiter to community leader had inspired so many. A young boy approached, holding up a pair of sneakers he had just finished designing. Mr. Marcus, what do you think? He asked, his voice bubbling with excitement. Marcus knelt, examining the shoes. These are fire, he said, smiling. You've got real talent, kid. Keep at it. The boy beamed and ran off to show his friends, and Marcus stood, his chest swelling with pride. It's moments like that, Ben said quietly, that remind us why we do this. Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the room. You were right, Ben. Kindness, it changes everything. Ben smiled knowingly. And it's contagious. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself reflecting on how far he'd come. That night at Ella's diner felt like a lifetime ago, but it was the foundation for everything that followed. A simple act of compassion, helping a man eat his meal, had set in motion a series of events that transformed his life and the lives of countless others. Looking around at the bustling center, Marcus felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. For Ben, for the people who believed in him, and for the opportunity to do the same for others. At the back of the room, a banner hung proudly on the wall. Kindness starts here. Beneath it were the faces of the community, young and old, from all walks of life, forming a living testament to its truth. Marcus smiled, his heart full. The ripple of one small act had become a wave. And now, he was ready to see how far it could reach.